Okay. So thank you again, everyone, for. Oops. Okay. Thank you again for joining us. We are having a hybrid conference. Part of the speakers will speak from here, from the auditorium, and the others will do it via the web. We wanted to start with the Israel Ministry of Science and Innovation, but she is in the Corona cabinet right now, so she will join us later. And we will start with Mr. Andreas Könen, the Director of Cyber and Information Security at BMI Germany. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning, dear Yigal. Dear participants, I'm very glad to be here, and actually it's my first travel abroad since the starting of Corona, and so I enjoy it very much and hope you do too. So cybersecurity research helps us to understand future opportunities, but also future threats for internal security in Israel, in Germany, and all over the world. So there are lots of examples. I like to mention a few to see or to demonstrate you where we are going as a Federal Ministry of the Interior and where, for example, our research interests are. One example is post-quantum cryptography. The BSI has a long-standing tradition looking into this, and you will see quantum computers will be a threat for asymmetric cryptography currently in use. That means we have to support crypto agility on one hand, and on the other hand, we have to switch to post-quantum cryptography in critical areas, at least. That means, for example, the military, where it's very difficult to switch from one algorithm to the other, or it just means civilian applications like our identity card in Germany that's heavily based on asymmetric cryptography. And I know what I'm talking about because that's my special area. It has been my special area, clearly. In my position now, it's not possible to dive into that more closely. The next stop is quantum key distribution. That seems to be connected on the first glance, but actually isn't. It's a different technology, but it's a technology that in future will allow us to build even more secure networks. Unfortunately, formal assurance of security levels for this technology is still missing. So therefore, the BSI supports standardization of QKD for future developments and uses, government use, and to see how we can pose high formal requirements. Next is artificial intelligence. There is no talk that doesn't mention artificial intelligence, but it is clear that artificial intelligence will give us new possibilities for analyzing big data, for example, network logs for network security and forensic analysis in cybercrime. So that means for us, the use of AI is important in cybersecurity, first in prevention, secondly in detection. On the other hand, we have to fear that AI is to be used by cyber criminals and cyber attackers in large. So we have to look at this carefully. On the other side, AI also introduces new threats to classical information because it uses classical information differently than a human would use this information and may come to different conclusions that can't be seen through and can't be transparent from the beginning. So we have to analyze what security of AI actually means to us. Evaluating AI systems causes a lot of problems today, because we see how, for example, neural network is generated, but we can't see how the concrete instance is handled by the neural network because it has some abilities that are new and that are disruptive. So we have to deal with that aspect too. Where we are doing this, we're doing this with a new cyber agency in Germany that was built by the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of the Interior. we're going into the questions of cyber in aviation that has increasing importance for us, and we have to do it the legal way and the research way. We're going similarly into a global perspective of aviation, as the interconnectedness in the supply chain is a real threat that comes up to us either, and we are not in a position today to overlook the whole supply chain. We need research for that too. Interfaces are the critical points, and we have to find out how we can do this. So, in general, increasing digitalization is the next thing we have to dive into. For example, automated and connected driving is something where we are in Germany since a long time. We have a lot of car manufacturers, clearly, so we have to go into that. So that means we have always a double standpoint in the BMI. We are doing research and we try to get it into operation. We have a strong pressure to do this in operation. And so we are looking forward to basic research on one hand, to operational research on the other hand, and disruptive research for the new ideas and innovation that has to come up. Thank you very much and have a nice conference.
Thank you very much, Mr. Könen. Our next speaker will be Yigal, Unna, the Director of Cyber of the Directorate in Israel.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and thank you specifically, Könen, Andreas, my dear friend, for interesting points. Some of them we should elaborate even more. We'll talk about it later, about the quantum things. Well, it's obvious there's cannot be any cybersecurity without innovation. And cannot be any innovation without a strong research and development. And what we're discussing today here, but it's a tip of the iceberg of activity that is happening all this year long, maybe even a couple of years before, and even with the COVID-19 around us, we're still deepening our R&D in Israel and jointly with Germany. And that's a great thing because you cannot have a strong cyber ecosystem without strong leg based on academia, a strong leg based on industry. Now I'm here from the IAI representing one of the strongest parts of the Israeli defense industry, focusing on not just cybersecurity, but in aviation, in mobility, in transportation, even in the maritime, as you've now signed agreement with the Israeli shipyards. All of it is part of a strong ecosystem that is crucial to Israel's success in cybersecurity and for Germany, as well as we work not just on R&D, but on operational aspects also. In the digital world, in the cyber world, we still need transportation. We still need the physical thing of moving from here and there, and we're so glad that you and your delegation could have come physically here. It's not like any hybrid, sorry for the hybrid viewers. It's different when we can travel and go and meet and see one another in person. And as we go more and more digitalized in transportation, we need to secure it even better. Germany is by no doubt a superpower in transportation. You mentioned some of the brands in cars, but it's also in trains and in maritime and almost in everything. Who doesn't know Mercedes and BMW and Volkswagen and we understand the potential of, on one hand, the threats that can aim or began to aim at the transportation mobility, and also the opportunities to research and develop solutions, vaccination to this emerging pandemic. And it's only obvious that we need to join hands and join forces and build even stronger relations also in the R&D, in the research and the deep research, to pave new ways, to find new ideas, and to, most important, to find the ways to implement them, to make transportation, and not only transportation, as strong and robust and secure as we can get. Today, we're going to open in a ceremony afternoon the transportation, smart transportation lab, cyber lab, of course. We're on a cyber week with the joint venture with the IAI and with the Ministry of Transportation. And this is another symbol. And of course, on Thursday, we're going to have the main event on maritime, on the Ashdod seaport. All of it are symbols or just signs of a long way that we're already marching in, and we need to broaden it and make it an autobahn that we can run faster, stronger, and together to build the platforms secure and safe as possible in the coming, or it's already here, digital age of transportation and mobility. So good luck, and thank you for your kind words and for the cooperation. It's not trivial, and it's fantastic. And we discussed yesterday in Beersheba how to move things even forward, and I'm sure we're going to get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yigal. Since I'm sitting on the backbone of the relations between Israel, Germany, and the European Commission, I know how much is important. I don't know if you know, but Israel have already 2 digital innovation hubs here in Israel, one for smart cities and one for smart mobility. And I think that this is important to have now the lab of cyber and transportation. We will go now to the first track that we have today, and I want to pass the table to Dadi. Okay. Dadi Gertler is the Executive Director of System and Technology Alliances in Israel of the National Cyber Directorate, and he will be the moderator of the first track. Dadi, please.
So good morning to all. It's a pleasure to be here in this collaboration session, R&D collaboration session, Germany and Israel. The focus of this panel is aviation cybersecurity. And it's a kind of hybrid panel. And 2 of our speakers are actually in Germany now. I hope that we will be able to see them some way. So before we will see Mr. Frank Schubert and Mr. Christoph Muller, we have here Noam Krakover from the Israeli aerospace industry. Noam is a dear friend. Yes, please. Noam is a dear friend. We have worked together in the INCD a few years ago. Noam is an officer, ex-officer of the Israeli Air Force. Oh, thank you. Was. Yeah, retired. and now is a Chief Revenue Officer of the Cyber Division in the IAI. ELTA, of course. Mr. Christoph Muller. Christoph Muller is acting as Head of Defense and Research at the German Aerospace Center. He served as Executive Officer in technical finance at NATO for a few years, science and technology. And of course, he served also 12 years in the German Armed Forces, even been in Afghanistan. So, Christoph, happy, I don't see you actually, but happy to have you here. We can hear you, I hope.
I hope as well.
Mr. Frank Schubert, can you hear us? So, Christoph, would you like to start?
It would be a pleasure. Debbie, thanks for introducing me. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to be in this panel with my colleague Frank, as you mentioned, and Noam. It will be a pleasure to talk a little bit through here, and also thanks to the German and Israeli delegation, Mr. Könen and Mr. Unna, for the good introduction on innovation, collaboration, and I would like to add here action. But because I think this is a very important piece here, but I come to this a little bit later. First, I think I was introduced, or I want to talk a little bit about how planes fly. And in the past, we thought there's air flowing around a body. And then we thought, it's magic. Somewhere in the past, we then discovered, there must be a combination out of thrust, drag, lift, and weight. So pure physics and probably a little bit of magic behind it to make aircraft fly. And then somehow we figured out, and since more than a century now, airplanes or planes are flying. So it's somehow also a proof of magic, I guess. And obviously we mastered not only to keep one plane in the air, we mastered it multiple times. So this is a good start, I think, for the developments ahead, because what we are doing right now and what we want to do in the future a little bit more is we want to explore this kind of magic a little bit further, because I think the physics are well understood at this point in time. And what do we see right now from also from a research, but also from a military perspective, is that we move from single platforms to join all domain, name it, be it operations, C2, communications, environment. Each profession has its own definition, its own wording for this. But what it means really is we see a general evolution towards highly integrated operations, connecting everything at every time simultaneously. This is not new, the idea. I think the idea was brought up roughly 5 years ago by the Americans. Other nations adopted it right now. In Europe, we see the Future Combat Air System, Tempest, and I think although the Israelis have similar approaches upcoming in the near future. The main goal is to speed up this observe, orient, decide, act, this OODA loop, as military calls it, and to give us a little bit superior about our adversaries. But what this has to do with airplanes, basically, we have to move our planes from single platforms with limited data sharing capabilities, and I include here also the F-35, because all the fifth generations will not have enough data sharing capabilities to what the joint all-domain operations will require towards a sixth generation fighter concept, which is characterized. Yeah. I would like so, but I think my technology makes me a little bit hard. I cannot share my screen and put on my camera here. I'm very sorry for that. I will put it on after my talk if this is okay for you. I'm very sorry, but I think my face is not the most important here. I think people can live with it right now. Okay, so we have to move to sixth generation, which is characterized to highly networked and distributed task execution. What this then means in reality is we have manned motherships, unmanned system, and legacy system working together in so-called combat cloud operation. In very simple terms, and we hope that technology will get us there, and with a little bit of magic, we hope we can fix this. But then this morning, my daughter came to my room and said, okay, that magic and unicorns are not real. Probably mermaids are, but we have a lot of issues to tackle there. Of course, technological, but I think we put a lot of effort, as far as introduced with this panel here, and research, development, and acquisition that will get us there on the technical side. But then I think we will face a big wall that is called bureaucracy, and we have to work with airworthiness, certification, safety and health regulations, airspace integration, air traffic management, just to name a few of them. And I think this is something we should not ignore, and this is where what initially told action comes into play here, where we have to act, and where we also start to act not only in Israel but in Germany as well. So since we cannot only focus on security, or in this case here cybersecurity, we also have to address the airworthiness, air traffic management, just to name two. So the safety aspect, and safety and security are two sides of the same coin. They cannot work without each other. What do I mean with this is airworthiness, air traffic management is basically the avoidance of malfunction. I think this is for current system, this is well understood. Also for the legal frameworks are well worked. It's a deterministic process or procedure, so the root cause effects are well understood. It's a long process to work through, and it's even longer process to adapt to new regulations. And one basic rule we at least have to apply in Germany and then the European airspace and the whole is, if you want to use a civil airspace, you have to adapt to civil rules, even if the civil rules are probably not 100% designed to your system, but you have to adapt to those. In addition, then we see the cybersecurity issue upcoming. So the unlawful seizure of your aircraft, while the civil industry or the civil side of the industry, the use case there is the single aircraft at the moment with hundreds of passengers, which is somehow different to that what the militaries look into. But the basic problem is will be the same: the increasing complexity, the interdisciplinarity of the problems, the digitalization. We'll talk this days about mobility. So the whole supply chain is integrated, is also connected. So this will increase the vulnerability as well. And from our perspective, we have just started, and I'm happy that Frank and Noam will add to this later. But in the civil side, we have just started to address this issue, also with flow of funding. So what we see basically is that we have it's mandatory to integrate military aircrafts into the civil airspace, but we have to integrate a class of military aircraft that is highly networked, has distributed and highly automated functions. This is which are not a use case for the civil aviation industry. So hence the military authorities are in the driver's seat to adopt, to propose new regulations that will us then enable to implement all the Agile innovations that are proposed, that are discussed during this week and on other conferences as well. So how do we address this or parts of those issues in the German Aerospace Center? So basically, we said, okay, there is a need to go to zero trust approach. We have this for the safety operations anyway, and then for the cybersecurity operations as well. So because we have the need to continuously deliver the intended functions despite the adverse events, being it malfunctions, being it adverse events. On the one hand side, we do this with a close cooperation with the military and the civil authorities to work those regulations, to give them a very early heads up about the upcoming technologies. What does it mean for the airworthiness of the airplanes, and that they can early adapt, talk with us. And I think this is a major role of research in the authorities. I do not see, I see industry here in a supporting role, but not in the driver's seat. And then we have, of course, a technical side of life. So when we say safety and security are one, and we have to work it together. then, so we cannot independently work on it. So let's go in a we have to move from a regulation-based safety towards a monitoring risk approach, which means 3 parts. You need detection, hence you have to have a monitoring architecture, you have monitoring algorithms, you have monitoring modes. Second, you will need to respond. If you spot some things, we will have evaluation and mitigation strategies, countermeasure evaluation, and also some kind of decision making. And I think this will be the hot spot in the future when it comes to decision making. We have a lot of ethical discussions in Germany, which are good, but which also put the spot there that if you move towards a more automated, then you have to give more trust to the machines. And I think this is a long way to go, and which is probably not the same speed as technology development. And then you have the recovery mode. Okay, you have static redundancies, means you have a single or 2 engines on one platform, or you have dynamic redundancies, meaning you have multiple unmanned systems performing the same task. What happens if one fails? Can you still execute the task or safely operate your mission? You have on the air updates and self-recovery modes. Those are all within those technical solutions where you go for monitoring instead of rule-based or paper-based safety operations. Finally, when I discovered that mermaids are probably real, despite what my daughter said, and I look at the interdisciplinary research at DLR. So our research can build on a fast research infrastructure, going from traditional wind tunnels to high power computing, ground-based simulators, and one of the latest tools we have is an in-flight simulation system. We can simulate all of those in a real environment, which then allows us a quick feedback loop, which also speeds up the development. And what we have to look into is the engineering of resilient AI, where the AI does not come from DLR, but we adapt those from startups and from industry. Look into those. How do they operate in highly complex environment? How do they operate in massively distributed systems? What is has their hierarchies or federal networks are sufficient? We have to look into robustness and monitoring. What can we do with the limited resources, especially on unmanned disposable machines, if we have a desire to do a lot with deep learning and machine learning, which requires a lot of computational power. What is required to go for real time, because we need the information now. And then, of course, we have a lot of known malfunctions, but we have even more unknown adverse events in the operating environment that we have to include in our considerations. Response and recovery, of course, we have to go beyond the single platform. You will hear today the system of system concept multiple times. Which gives us new opportunities, but also new challenges in the future. We have operational margins. How can we operate in a civil environment? How can we operate in an operation environment? And then we have, of course, a trust. So we cannot leave the man out of the loop. We have to consider it as long as former pilots procure aircrafts. We have to also consider former pilots or pilots as a stakeholder. And finally, of course, airworthiness will be, as I mentioned before, a main player to get all the good innovations, all the good technology into the air. Otherwise, it's stay on the ground. And all of this we want to achieve in good cooperations with our national MODs and authorities, with industry, of course, include them in our research programs. And also to enable then the technology transfer into real products. Since we are governmentally funded or funded by the MOD, all the collaboration has to go through the MOD. This is where we are handcuffed, but anyway, I think this is a workable way since decades. And I think with this, Debbie, I would hand over back to you and switch on my camera.
Thank you very much, Christoph. It was very interesting, and definitely the challenge of having military aviation in civil aerospace is very challenging. We have here in the crowd a few Israeli pilots, and definitely they know what you are speaking about. Yes, we can see you. Fantastic. Can we see Mr. Schubert as well? Can you hear us, Frank? Okay. So before we will introduce, oh, yes, we can see. Hi, Frank. I'll introduce Mr. Frank Schubert to you all. Dr. Frank Schubert is the head of Airbus Cybersecurity, Defense, and Strategic Programs in Germany. Okay. Oh, I see. Fantastic. And Frank has graduated electrical engineering and information technology, was a member of scientific staff at the DLR in the past, and he joined Airbus at 2012. Okay, so we will start our session. Our fireside chat. Noam, would you like to join us, or would you like to grab a mic? Thank you. Okay, so as you all understand, aviation is a very complicated ecosystem. Civil aviation, military aviation, and all together. Aviation, as mentioned, is living in a very complicated, fragmented ecosystem. And of course, the cyber risks are there while going through all the digital transformation and the system of systems and all highly connected and so on and so forth. So I have a few questions for you. Christoph, please. What kind of research is required to provide appropriate answers to face the challenges that we have talked about, of course, in light of the system of systems?
I think some of the bigger challenges are really the interoperability, since we'll see not only nations want to work together, but also industry. We will not be able to buy everything by one supplier, even if this would be desirable. But at least when we work international-wise, we need to think about interoperability. And that leads us to standards that has to be addressed what we do since decades for military hardware, but even more important now for the software developments. And since we have some very advanced companies in Europe as well as in Israel, but also very protective national procurements, we will face some challenges that are beyond pure technology that will hamper us then and really work together in an environment, and also opens up vulnerabilities for our system that are operated and threat vectors as well.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Frank, would you like to add on that? About the kind of research required?
Yes, that's actually very true. So to bring the systems into operation, that requires like a orchestrated approach on different aspects. So Christoph, I liked your picture on FCAS very much, right? When you remember the screen, the graph where the systems were interconnected. We had like the new fighter, of course, there was a high altitude platform, there were like legacy fighters stations on the ground. And actually, to make this happen, this is a real challenge. I mean, this is the requirements of the future military scenarios that we will see. that the customers have, the MODs. But to make this happen, we need to move in many respects. So you also mentioned zero trust. That's of course one approach for the interconnection. Also, the secure connectivity is an aspect here. And so what we will see is the different life cycles of all these products. So they will overlap, right? We have the legacy systems, we have systems to be developed. We make sure that, of course, all operate secure for themselves with a product security lifecycle process. Still, they need to act together as one system of systems. And to make this happen, I would say the concepts are not there yet. So here's a lot of research required in coordination with the accreditation authorities. So we can probably fulfill technically the requirements the MODs have, but then to get accreditation for that, that will be a challenge. Well, luckily, there's time, of course. I mean, until FCAS will fly, it's still some years to go. 2030, 2040 maybe, we will see. But the time is now to start actually the cooperation to bring up concepts like information-centric data processing, zero trust networks, including wireless secure connectivity among many platforms. So you're completely right. I agree. Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to add that, and we will touch it later on. But in civil aviation, well, we all are very used to the technology transformation in the IT world, where everything is connected, everything is mobile, everything is changed very fast. A lot of applications. In the aviation, it's quite different. And here we have a few challenges. We will touch it a bit later. Just for you to know, we are going through kind of a risk assessment to e-enabled aircrafts to understand where are the cyber risks there. And an e-enabled aircraft is, talking mainly about civil aviation, is mainly it's kind of a flying data center, but very different from the IT world still. Now, would you like to add?
Yes. Here? Okay. First of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank you all. Of course, it's a great pleasure. I didn't present myself yet, although Daddy tried. I'm from IELTA. I'm the CRO, Chief Revenue Officer. I'm with IAI now for 3.5 years. And before that, I worked with Daddy at the INCD. And it's very good to be here again from the other side of the... Now, regarding your question, sir, and regarding life cycle, the problematic life cycle, and the combination between the high vulnerability on one hand and the high importance to human lives and operational continuity that some of our colleagues just mentioned. I think that the magic word from our side, at least, is hybrid and cooperation, two magic words. And what we are doing and trying to deal with the challenges of the R&D on one hand, and the already needed cybersecurity and cyber defense or protection, whatever, is that we combine. For example, we established what we call the IACCC, the Israeli Cyber Aviation Companies Consortium, based on our experience with the ICCC that deals with solutions, already existing solutions for the ecosystem, because the threat is already here. And on the second thing is the R&D effort. And for example, we established a daughter company that we call Aviation, and we have something that we call SciLab, the idea of cybersecurity labs. And this is the idea of cooperation. As Yigal, Unna said, we won the tender for smart mobility cyber lab for the Israeli government. But today we also offer it to other governments because we understand the challenge is so huge and the life cycle is so problematic And of course, we have our own advantage because we have planes, because we are aerospace industry, but it's much more complex than this. So we believe in what we call the model of sister labs, that we're going to have designated, let's call it R&D centers that are cooperating between themselves. And we are doing it in the smart mobility world, at least we are trying to do it. And this will help this combination, this hybrid model, this cooperation between the government and the industry, between different governments and companies, between different academic institutes or research institutes, will allow us to solve the problem, to meet with this, to mitigate the problem, this huge problem of bad guys, vulnerabilities, and the life cycle.
Yes, please, Danny. I have a question to the three of you, and I want to take this one step further. And my question is regarding research infrastructure. Mr. Könen from the Ministry of Interior speak about quantum key distribution, the quantum encryption and everything. And of course about artificial intelligence. For that we need high performance computing. This infrastructure costs a lot. We have the academy, we have the industry, we have the military. Where should we build our research infrastructure that will serve everyone? Thank you.
Christoph, to you maybe?
Would be happy to. I think the question where to build is hard to answer. I think this will be always some kind of a national issue. But I think the point that Noah made earlier is the most important thing here. If you have those high expensive infrastructure we need, we have the responsibility also to share it with industry, with government, with other stakeholders, made national-wise or international-wise. And this is, I think, where in parts we lack this in Germany, that we are somehow also forced to work together with the good colleagues, Frank from Airbus, German Aerospace Center, and then also military authorities to work together to use, for instance, the infrastructure, the research infrastructure, including high power computation center, including the labs for quantum mechanics, including a satellite infrastructure for quantum key distribution, and so on and so forth. So this is available for research, but then also to get the technology then transferred to the industry, then they can provide it to the customer. I think this is something we have to get better in Germany in general, to get those three together and work on the same platforms, on the same research infrastructure.
You know, Danny, I think it's a wonderful question, and again, I think that we can't, the threats and the challenges are so huge that we need to understand that we can't solve it alone. Not the industry, not the government. We're still liberal countries, you know, and the price is enormous, And I think that the cooperation between the different pillars inside the countries and between the countries. And again, we are trying to do it because, for example, with the smart mobility, it's very close. It's a family. And the Israeli government, the ISERD, and the Ministry of Transportation are investing money because we can't do it alone. But we need, let's call it, an economic base. And again, even in the industry itself, we as IAI, we are a huge company. We don't have the solutions for everything. So we involve, and we have partners, we're full partnership with startups, with international companies, because we can't solve it alone. And again, one of our lessons learned is that one lab is not enough. We need to establish, let's call it a network. This is the cyber world, so a network of labs that are going to cooperate between themselves with the academy. And for example, high-level computing or supercomputing, whatever, it's the best example because the infrastructure is so expensive that no one can afford it by itself. But the knowledge be for the use of all, of everyone. Otherwise, we're going to miss it. Otherwise, you know, one of my colleagues mentioned this, the supply chain, and today in the last, I don't know, 18 months, we are living in a new kind of problems in the supply chain. We are familiar with it. We can't solve it alone. The vendors are vulnerable. We need to cooperate to solve the problem. And this network, this infrastructure, the needed international infrastructure, without it, we can't solve it.
Okay, so we have...
That's right. In addition, of course, industry is protecting the platforms, components, encryption using post-quantum methods, but it's really hard to find the experts there, right? So it, in the end, again, boils down to education and what happened like many years ago when like programming languages were sometimes often first introduced in universities. So students just started working with it, Java, for example, many years ago. And since the post-quantum world and the work with quantum algorithms is fundamentally different from what we all know, this is actually the place where we should tackle the problem. Bring these new concepts into the schools, into the universities, like make quantum computers available in the cloud over the internet so that students can work with it and start developing algorithms. This will help our society drastically in a few years from now.
Yes, thank you very much, Frank, for that. Next topic, the aviation industry. I would like to talk about the aviation industry, the civil aviation industry mainly, but the military as well. It's a quite traditional industry. Definitely regarding everything regarding safety, which safety comes first, and security, which is two different things, safety and security. And the certification cycles in civil aviation, at least, are very, very long, with a lot of standards from EASA, from FAA, from ICAO, and this takes a lot of time. Now, maybe Frank, for you first, what are the required changes to the traditional approach in order to cope with the dynamic and agile nature of, I would say, IT-oriented cybersecurity challenges?
Yeah, so what industry requires here is clear guidelines. And traditionally, you're right, aviation is a field that moves rather slowly. Still, we are seeing good progress here. So safety standards like the CS25 are currently being amended with security aspects, and this helps industry very much. So, of course, then it's also not a discussion anymore if and how cyber security needs to be brought into the design phases of components of platforms. But it's a requirement in the end. So having those aspects in standards helps everyone, the customers, industry, to be able to create secure platforms in the future.
No.
Well, I have to say that we see it as a, let's call it a double challenge for both. For the industry itself, we need to fit our solutions, I would say it, not to be too complicated, too challenging, because otherwise we were not going to solve the problem. The best example, I had a discussion with Tamir that sits in the audience a few months ago. What we expect our systems to do, only to monitor or even to mitigate with the threat in real time. We need to keep in mind that, let's call it the unique problems or unique characters of the aviation. This is one thing. The second thing is the regulation. My colleague here said that we need to have a guidelines. I think that we need to have let's call it a discussion regarding the capabilities and regulation. We need, it's a mutual influence. If only one side will going to come to the table and say, hey, this is the solution. On the other hand, these are the regulations, we're going to fail. We need to mutually influence each other. Otherwise, we can't solve it. Otherwise, the life cycle, the long life cycle, the vulnerabilities, the problems, it's very easy to kill this solutions when they're young, but we don't need it will be disaster. We need to influence each other on one hand, and we in the industry, we need to keep in mind a few things. First is our limitations. Second are the limitations of this sector. And third is that we need to fit and to mitigate the relevant reference threat. Otherwise, we can bring to the table a high-end solution. It's going to be too expensive. No one will invest in it, and it will never will pass the regulation. So we need to speak with each other and to fight together. The industry, the cyber industry, the aviation industry, the cyber industry, and the regulators together to find a solution. Otherwise, we're gonna fail.
Yes, thank you, Noam. Definitely, when we talk today, the whole high-tech industry, the software industry, we talk about being agile with high speed of releases, software releases, fixing vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities is quite hard today, right? When the airplanes become more and more digital ones with high connected communication to support new features, that's a real challenge, I think. And the question is, how can aviation industry adopt innovative technologies, new technologies, to make traditional communication protocols more safe and secure? Christoph, would you like to answer that? He's not there. So Frank, please take charge.
Yes, so you are right. Planes, the whole aviation industry, also airports are examples for cyber-physical systems. And especially connectivity is a key point here, secure connectivity. So what we've seen in the past is that currently also there's a digitalization ongoing. So the radio communication between the planes from the air to the ground is being digitalized currently. And connecting this to our earlier discussion, thinking there of algorithms that are post-quantum safe is a key factor. And I think this is a field where the research is currently heading. Also, looking at the system of systems approach that we had in the military context, it can be well applied to the civil world, right? Then the whole aviation industry has to is connecting systems in the end. Also, an airport is a system of systems. We have access control doors, we have baggage handling, we have flight operations, and most of those systems are connected with each other, sometimes with the internet, to provide information to the customers, right? And to handle this in a secure way is a challenge. Also, whenever new aspects are being introduced, think of baggage pickup at your doorstep. Think of contactless boarding with your Face ID. All this leads to an increase of attacks. To be able to find those attacks that happen in the physical world and have a combination with the cyber world, that's really a challenge. Think of spoofing when we are thinking of secure communication. If radio links are being spoofed, or if there's a counterfeited signal, and at the same time someone is starting a cyber attack, currently to detect those kind of hybrid attacks is really a challenge. And I'm happy that there's research ongoing. For example, in the SATI project, that's taking care of exactly those threats at airports, developing new secure operation centers that are being demonstrated in the future in 3 airports: Zagreb, Milan, Athens. As DLR is involved there, is heading the project, Airbus Cybersecurity is contributing with the correlation engine to be able to detect combined attacks from the physical world and the cyber world. So yeah, this is the future we need to go, and there's actually research going on for cyber-physical systems, including secure communications.
Yeah, and talking about these risks, let's now talk about the threat model. What is the threat reference?
Again, Tamir sits with us at the audience, sitting with us at the audience. I think it was 4 months ago. Tamir asked me about a very similar question, and my answer was that we are in the middle of arm race, if you remember, and we are in a huge arm race, and I'm not sure that we are winning it. But I think this is a hybrid arm race, and I think that we have numerous examples for it. On one hand, we can see the commercial, let's call it. It's funny to call it commercial, but I'm going to use this term, commercial threat. Guys who are trying to penetrate systems, that are using ransomwares and other stuff. And this is, let's call it the low level, although some of it is very complex. Threats. On the other hand, we can find what I usually use the term, the superpower threats. And we need to combine or to mitigate with both of them, although it's very important, very problematic, very expensive. Now, again, a few minutes ago, I said that we need to deal with the ecosystem. And again, regarding the last question that you asked Gadi, the connectivity problem is, we're all aware of it, and we need to deal with the ecosystem. Now, to deal with the ecosystem, mainly, let's call it, can solve the problems of the commercial threats. This is a wonderful thing, and it's going to give us a high level of resilience, but it's not going to solve the real, or at least the high-end the problem of the high-end threats. And we need to combine it, at least for some of the targets. We need to deal with the high level, or at least the national level threats, because we can see it. We can see in the last 2 years, we saw more and more, and we can see more and more attacks against critical infrastructure, attacks against the healthcare sector, whatever. Secrets, targets that no one dealt with them till a few years ago are now considered to be legitimate targets. So we need to be focused on both sides. Otherwise, we're going to leave the targets or the sector exposed. Now, of course, this is a very problematic and regarding and
no, I'm sorry for disruption. We have the Minister of Science and Technology. Yes.
Oh, Ben.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. It is my pleasure to say a few words on this important Cyber and Innovation Week as the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology of the State of Israel. I would like to open by expressing on behalf of the government of Israel and the people of Israel my deep condolences to our German friends over the devastating floodings last week. And as you know, Israel is an eternal friend of Germany, and we are ready to help you as much as they needed. The relationship and the science and technology and innovation cooperation with the state of Germany is very strong and is very strategic to our two countries. And it is an important collaboration that we are committed to prolonging. I was very happy to meet with President Steinmeier a few weeks ago in his visit to Israel. We discussed, among other things, the different collaborations in areas of science and technology and high technology. And we talked about setting up a visit in Germany in the future, in the coming future, in order to deepen and even strengthen more the collaboration of the two states. This kind of collaborations in areas of innovation and technology is important not only to the two countries. But as we all know, that technology and innovation is the way of making the world a better place. And so I see such cooperation as a vital to our future and to the relationship of the countries. So I'm wishing you a successful event, and I say thank you to the Helmholtz Association of the German Research Center. Wish you all a fruitful day and much success today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Farkash-HaCohen.
Thank you.
Now, Daddy, you can continue.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sure. So just to conclude, so thank you very much to Frank Schubert and to Noam Krakover and to Christoph Muller for your contribution to the panel. And now we continue. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Frank. Okay. Thank you for the speakers of the first track. We will move fast now to the second track of today, which will be on cyber and mobility, a necessary pillar of smart cities. Dania, do we have Mr. Frank Koster with us? Okay. We will have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, we will have two speakers in the second track. The first one is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Professor Frank Koster, the Founding Director, Institute of AI Safety and Security in the German Aerospace Center at DLR. Professor Koster, please start.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So it's a pleasure to present some of our thoughts in the area of digital infrastructure. I will mainly talk about the benefits from such an infrastructure from the perspective of mobility, but I will extend the picture at the end of the talk, in particular regarding smart living, smart city, and smart regions, to say so that beside the domain-specific solutions, there is a high relevance of cross-sectoral activities, and I will also talk about this topic. So let me start with my presentation. So I will talk about Gaia-X. Gaia-X is in Europe one of the larger activities striving for a digital infrastructure in terms of a digital ecosystem, so an open and flexible, extendable service-based infrastructure in which you easily can make your services available so that they can be integrated and merged with other services to come up with innovative new applications, which are based on data which is securely shared within this infrastructure. So, Gaia-X is following some guiding principles. So one is to follow the European data protection principles. We need to have a high level of authenticity and trust. The infrastructure should be open and easy to use. And it is important to emphasize the topic of data sovereignty and self-determination regarding to grant access to your data and control how deep you want to allow someone to use your data. It is an important step regarding a free market in the area of digital services and digital products. Needs to be modular and interoperable because we want to be also integrated in other initiatives, and also usability is of high importance. And currently it has a high visibility in Germany and also in Europe, because many of the European countries are currently interested in setting up these type of infrastructure, installing some hubs where the discussions regarding the requirements of this infrastructure are discussed, and also the implementations are guided. And also we have an exchange with colleagues in the US, Japan, and in China, because what we see is that in particular the value chains we have currently are not restricted to the borders of the country, so we have to be open and also have a discussion with other countries on these international level. With a focus on mobility, what is the main goal here? We want to provide a digital infrastructure which helps us to implement a user-oriented and user-friendly mobility system, which is systematically thought so that we have all the different subsystems and their interactions in mind. And by design, we want to integrate them. So we are talking about an intermodal traffic system and an overall coordinated and cooperative system. The different building blocks are connected, and digital technologies are of high relevance. For instance, we have a server system providing traffic-related data, and we have smart and automated vehicles which are part of this picture. The system should be robust, highly available, and we have high requirements in the area of safety and security. And as I mentioned in the context of Gaia X already, everything should be open and flexible, service-oriented. And one thing which is also important for a smart city, everything should be capable of transformation, and sustainability is also an important part. Beside mobility, in Germany, we are discussing Gaia X also as an infrastructure for other application domains, which are mentioned here. And as I already said, in the end of my presentation, I will talk a little bit more about smart living, smart city, and smart region, which I select there with a relation to mobility. The benefit from Gaia X as an open infrastructure is that we can start with research and development activities within this infrastructure, and we can use the same infrastructure also for our products and to operate these digital products and just migrate the software artifacts which we are developing and proposing to more robust platforms, but the same infrastructure and the same design principles are available also in the research field, but then in the same way also in the production environment. So this is nice because we have not to re-implement our applications. This is also a benefit when we talk about cooperation and collaboration. It is easy to use this platform then for cooperate with other institutions from the research area, but also from the industry domain, because we have the same platform in research and also in the industry available. So this helps to speed up with innovation, because we easily can transfer our research findings then to productive productive environments. So these are the important topics, and what we are now doing is we try to identify the requirements from different use cases in the mobility domain. For instance, automated vehicles, which we have, the management of automated fleets of vehicles and other things are then of importance. And we try to identify the requirements so that we can implement them in Gaia X, and also we try to identify generic solutions which are of relevance in different use cases, so that we have a set of generic services available which are highly robust and easy to use in different application contexts. To do this, we collected in the domain mobility in the German Gaia X Hub several use cases. We have more than 30 use cases collected. And these use cases are provided by our members. So these are currently more than 200 members which are active in the mobility domain. And we have more than 30 use cases identified of relevance. And we clustered them so that we are able to start some projects. And this is what we are currently doing. So to the end of this year, we want to have 5 larger projects running, focusing on clusters of these use cases, implementing these use cases on the basis of Gaia X, and in parallel, they try to identify generic services which then can be also used for the implementation of new use cases in the mobility domain, but which also can be offered to other domains also to pick up these services to come up with cross-sectoral activities. The clusters we identified are in the area of advanced mobility service support and remote operation of automated and connected mobility services, decentralized digital identity and data sharing, production and after sales and lifecycle, and AI-based services and AI platforms. So these are the
cluster. We have 1 more minute.
Yep, thank you. And these are the projects we want to start till the end of this year, focusing on automated vehicles, so providing all the relevant data, management of automated fleets of automated vehicles. So the topic of remote operation is of high interest. And we want to work on decentralized digital identity and data sharing, which is in the center of many applications, and also we have in mind the overall life cycle of our products. Important are the horizontal activities overarching these projects in the area of data quality management, digital identities, as I mentioned, data governance, authentication, authorization, and accounting, and also how to connect our data sources. So these are of high relevance. And also we are connected to other larger activities like Catena X, so one of the larger automotive-oriented Gaia X project, and also to the Datenraum Mobilität. And with respect to smart city and smart living, what we see is we don't have to discuss, or it's not suitable just to discuss the single domains. We have to come up with some cross-sectoral activities. And it is obvious in a smart city, we have different pillars which are important there. Mobility and traffic infrastructure are 2 which are labeled here, but we have all the other things which are also of high importance in a smart city. And we want to provide a data and service ecosystem so that we can come up with also some applications which use the data from different domains, so that we have integrated services providing benefits for the people living in a city.
Thank you very much. I think that our time has passed. We have to move to our second speaker, and maybe we'll have time for 1 or 2 questions at the end. Our second speaker will be Professor Tali Hatuka, the head of laboratory for contemporary urban design in the Tel Aviv University. Tali, please come.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Do you hear me? So I want to look at these issues of innovation and technology from the other end, and for whoever wants to implement something in Israel, I think that the report that I'm going to briefly present is of importance. We just completed last year a report that engaged with the race of different cities for digitization in Israel. And this is an interesting report because it's a collaborative work that include also member faculty, Professor Michael Bienhak from the law faculty, myself, I'm an urban planner, and Eran Toch, who is an engineer focused on technology. And I think that what's important for us was actually to understand what's going on in cities. So we keep innovating. And for me, as a policymaker and a planner, I wanted to know what happens at the end. What should we do, how, why? And we wanted to understand the implementation process, the barriers and the challenges and the various strategies and perceptions, not only of the local government, but also of the central government and the private sector. You were talking before about the collaboration. There is a name for this. It's called Triple Helix. This is for you, Danny. Triple Helix is a framework for the public sector, the private sector, and the academy. There is massive amount of literature about this. So anyhow, we wanted to explore this. And we also had a normative goal. We understood that actually policymakers and mayors and sometimes ministers do not know much about these topics. So how do they take a decision regarding this topic? How do they invest huge amount of money of public funding about these kind of innovations? And so for us, there was a normative also goal here to teach them a little bit, to explore the different fields. And at the end, actually, we spread this report all over the country. And this is the good news, they're working with this. So what we did was actually mapping everything they are doing. We also ask for, by the way, how much they fund, how much they spend on this. This is something that it was hard to get and we didn't get it. So we don't know how much they spend on all these issues, but this is just a partial list. We looked and interviewed 20 different cities in Israel that actually in this process. And we asked them different questions about the tools available, how do actually they engage with the cyber-related aspect of the smart city and so on. We were very much focused about the vulnerability and cyber attacks and so forth. Methodologically, we actually interviewed people from, as I said, public sector, private sectors, and private companies. I have to say, everyone were collaborating quite enthusiastically. Actually, the private companies have an interest to collaborate and to market themselves. And also we understood, and also we interviewed and did really big questionnaire of 500 people in Tel Aviv, because we were also interested how the public is reacting to it, who is using all these great innovations. So just briefly, the report, 5 minutes is fine. So 5 chapters, one is very much focusing on planning. The point is, most of the planning of the municipalities in Israel do not have at all a strategic plan. They don't know exactly what they are going to implement, how and why, also in Tel Aviv. Regarding technical and infrastructure cyber threats, this is a very important, again, conclusion that we came up with. There is not yet a very strong culture of information security in all levels of the organization. This is something that we need to build up. In terms of privacy, regulation is very much behind, but also in general. So I'm saying this for all these great innovation, when they need to get to the ground, there are so many barriers, and many of the municipalities are hesitant in implementing this. Fourth, social inclusion. What we found in the report, and again, it's also based on different tools that we use, the rich are getting richer. They have the access to digitization. In Israel, most of the people have access, right? It's not the physical access, but how we use it and for what. And again, at the end, we actually offer them integrative framework that actually look at all these 4 dimensions together: planning, technology, privacy, and society, and how not just to focus on the innovation, how to implement it, but how to integrate everything together. So for me, this is very, very important. I just want to add a few things from published scientific papers that we did, and maybe I don't have the time to review them all, but for example, one of the things that we've done in terms of looking at the participants or the residents is to understand what type of user, who are actually the people that use digitization. And you can look at this table and you can maybe find yourself. We identify 4 key profiles: the active user, the watchful user, non-user, conscious non-user. So nowadays, it's not that we have a technology and everyone are using it, but we have like different profiles of users. The active user is using everything, not caring about technology. Watchful user is a little bit hesitant about technology and privacy. Non-user is actually detached from it. And conscious non-user is something that we are seeing even much more now after COVID-19, people that are consciously not using these innovative technologies. So a lot of studies using GIS and microdata, actually looking at how all this innovation being implemented in Tel Aviv, being used by whom and who benefit from that, and actually how the municipality, should the municipality should further invest in that. There is no doubt that mobility is a strong, important issue, but there are so many other issues that are in question. And one of the last papers that was just recently published was From Smart Cities to Smart Social Urbanism. And just last one more minute. So you can see this slide full of innovation, lots of projects being implemented in the city, but who again gains from it, how people actually decide what to invest in one project and not in the other. And what we recommend at the report, but also in our published work, is to think about a structured decision-making, thinking into consideration the urban contextual sensitivity, and think about the urban societal needs. I think right now there is a huge gap between ideas, technology, innovation, and what happens in the ground. And this is maybe why we face these traffic jams every day. With all these technologies and with all these advancements, there are lots of major issues that needs to be tackled from bottom up and not just from top down, from the research and the government. Thank you very much.
I have a lot of questions to Professor Ha-Cohen and Professor Costa, but I think that our time is past. So I will ask it afterwards. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone from Germany that joined us, and I hope it was interesting for you all. Thank you very much.